Good evening. The Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, January 26, 2022 is now called to order. Director Paulson, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Janoff?
Here.
Commissioner Raspy?
Here.
Commissioner Tavana?
Here.
Commissioner Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Thomas?
Here.
Vice Chair Barnett?
Yes. Here.
And Chair Hansen.
Here. So thank you very much. And before we continue with our meeting, I'd like to turn this over to staff who will address the rules of decorum and civility for our town public meetings.
The public is welcome to participate in the meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meeting is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. For the benefit of the entire community, the Town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the agenda. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at board, commission, or committee meetings. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at board, commission, or committee meetings. All public comments at the board, commission, or committee meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the chair may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the commissioners exiting the chamber or meeting room. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the commissioners would return to the chamber or meeting room and the chair would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a board, commission, or committee meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code, Section 403.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will move on and discuss public participation. As the Planning Commission conducts this meeting on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of Los Gatos, we encourage active participation, which is essential for democracy and critical to the work of this Planning Commission. That participation can occur through, first, written comments about agenda items submitted to staff prior to a meeting are always welcome and helpful. And then during our meeting, there are two opportunities for members of the public to participate. First, during verbal communications, an individual may speak on any item that is not on the agenda. And during the hearing of a specific agenda item, any member of the public may speak about that item that is on the agenda. When called to speak, please state your name and address for the record. Alternatively, you may choose to speak anonymously. It is requested, however, that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. So with that, we will move on to verbal communications. And the verbal communications portion of the meeting, members of the public are invited to address the commission on any issue that is not on the agenda. Director Paulson, do we have any members of the public that would like to speak in verbal communications?
Chair Hansen, I do not see any hands raised for verbal communications.
Okay, so then we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent calendar. We have one item to be acted upon with a single motion, and that is approval of the draft minutes of the January 12th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, which was our last meeting. Does any commission member or member of the public wish to pull this item from the consent calendar? I don't see any hands raised. Seeing none, may I have a motion for approval of the consent calendar? Vice Chair Barnett. You're on mute.
Excuse me. I move to approve the consent calendar from the last meeting.
Thank you. And do we have a second? Commissioner Tabana.
I second that.
All right, thank you for that. Before we take our roll call vote, are there any comments or changes requested for the meeting minutes before I call the question? I did have one thing that I wanted to bring up, which is for the item on Olive Street that we discussed at the last meeting. It did talk about continuing the meeting, but it didn't talk about why. So my request is to add that we decided to continue the meeting to give the applicant more time to speak with the neighbors that were in opposition to the project. So does anyone have any issues with making that change to the meeting minutes? Okay, so then can I ask the maker and the seconder, are you okay with amending the motion to approve the minutes with that one change?
Yes, I approve to move the approval of the consent calendar with that clarification.
Okay, and the second? All right, thank you. All right, so I will do the roll call vote. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Tabana.
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy.
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so it passes unanimously. So we will now move on to public hearings, which is the agenda item 2. And this is requesting approval for the construction of a second-story addition to a contributing single-family residence to exceed the floor area ratio standards, and also construction of an accessory structure with reduced side and rear setbacks in the University Edeland Historic District. It's on property zoned R-1D, and it's located at 202 University Avenue, APN 529-04001. Architecture and site application S-21-019. Property owners Tyler and Christine Shuey, and applicant J. Plett Architect. And then our project planner is Sean Mullen. Are there any disclosures from commissioners on this item? I don't see any. And may I see a show of hands from commissioners who have visited the property? Okay, very good. And I understand Mr. Mullen will be giving the staff report for this item.
Thank you and good evening. Before you this evening is a request to construct additions to an existing single-family residence located in the University Edeland district. The additions include a 127 square foot ground floor addition at the rear of the residence and a new 1,197 square foot second story. The height of the proposed residence would increase from 22 feet to 28.5 feet. The project also includes improvement of the existing crawl space to construct a 1,263 square foot basement that does not count towards FAR. The proposed additions would match and reinforce the Italianate Victorian architecture through matching forms, materials, and details. The project would exceed the allowable FAR by 5% or 329 square feet. The Planning Commission may approve an FAR above what is allowed when making findings related to consistency with the residential design guidelines and compatibility with the surrounding properties. At the requested size, the residence would be the third largest in terms of FAR and square footage in the immediate neighborhood. There are also 4 other homes in the immediate neighborhood that exceed their allowable FAR, and the FAR of the proposed residence would rank in the middle of these homes. The project also includes construction of a new 484 square foot detached garage with reduced side and rear setbacks of 3 feet where 5 feet is required. The town code allows the deciding body to approve an accessory structure with reduced setbacks to no less than 3 feet from the property line when the proposal is found to be compatible with the neighborhood and consistent with the residential design guidelines. The applicant has provided a letter of justification for the requested exception and a neighborhood plan showing examples of 8 other properties in the immediate neighborhood having an accessory structure with reduced setbacks. The Historic Preservation Committee reviewed the project and provided recommendations under a preliminary review in April of last year. These recommendations included reducing the massing, stepping back the second-story addition, and lowering the roof height while ensuring consistency with the architecture, exploring a site plan that was less crowded, and incorporated landscaping to soften the site. The applicant revised the project and responded to these recommendations by lowering the roof height by 1 foot 6 inches, providing examples showing how the proposed project is consistent with the Italianate Victorian architecture, and eliminating the previously proposed attached carport on the south elevation of the detached garage. The committee reviewed the revised project in July of last year and forwarded a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission. Based on the analysis provided in the staff report, staff recommends approval of the architecture and site application, subject to the recommended conditions of approval contained in Exhibit 3. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mullen. And do any commissioners have questions for staff at this point? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Okay, then we can move on and open the public hearing and give the applicant up to 5 minutes to address the commission. And just to note that this time of 5 minutes includes any and all speakers on behalf of the applicant. So who would be speaking for the applicant? Is it Mr. Plett?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Plett, go ahead and be.
Good evening, commission members. From the inception of this project, we worked very closely with planning staff and HPC, and as a result, we gained a unanimous vote from the HPC and the recommendation from staff, as you just heard from Sean. We also conducted extensive neighbor outreach throughout the project from the design phase and then after the completion of the design. And we gained support of all the immediate neighbors, and that's all documented in the planning package as well. The proposed design respects the original historic home, its Italianate style, and the design blends amicably into the historic district. Our aim was not to design the largest floor area, the largest FAR, but to simply be compatible, with the existing neighborhood composition. The design also preserves the view corridors to the mountains of the side and rear neighbors, is something that we strove to accomplish with this layout. And it's clearly delineated on the site plan. We show it's in blue on the site plan, the side view, the side neighbor, the views that are preserved for him, and the rear neighbors, that the view from the kitchen window on the lower level out to the hills was left open with this design. This also can be illustrated if you look at the elevations on sheet A2, the openings that have been provided for view sheds. This home will also meet the needs of the growing Shuey family, and we hope that you too will find it worthy of approval as well. And for the time being, Tyler Shuey will say a few words right now.
Hi, good evening. Just a couple words on our background. My wife, Christina, and I, we grew up in the area, in the Bay area of San Jose. Looked around quite a lot and talked quite a lot as we were looking for a home, and my wife was pregnant with our first daughter at the time, and looked around a lot of areas, Willow Glen, Campbell, some of the other areas, and really just thought Los Gatos was the right place for us to raise a family. We have my parents are still in the Bay area. We have some other family that lives off by La Rinconada golf course, so we've got some good family around. And as we've settled into our home and tried to improve it over the years, if those of you who've driven by over the last couple of years, we've tried to do different things to beautify it ourselves. But as our family's grown, we had a second daughter, and now my wife is about 7 weeks away from what will be our third daughter, which is great. but we've got a need for more space. And we hope with this project and having some more space that we can continue to grow and put roots down here in this community.
Perfect.
So I know we're limited on time, so I'll pass the baton back to Jay to make a few other remarks.
Yeah, I think that we're good to go if you guys have any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do any of the commissioners have questions for the applicant? I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment. I do have one question. You mentioned about the two neighbors with the views. Are those neighbors, two of the neighbors that had written down their approval of the project that was in our packet?
Yes.
Okay, I thought as much, but I just wanted to check. Okay, that was the only question I had. Okay, so then I don't see any other commissioners with their hands up. So then we can go on to public participation and see if there are any members of the public that would like to ask questions or comment on the project. Do we have
Chair
any?
Hansen, would anyone like to speak on this project? If so, please raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, so then we can close this portion of the meeting, which is the public comments, and move back to the applicant. And you would have additional 3 minutes if you'd like to comment further on the application.
Mr. Platt, you can unmute yourself. You have up to 3 minutes if you would like.
Yeah, I think that the way that we went through the project, it speaks for itself. The research that we did with staff and the consultation that we did with HPC, and I think we would just ask for approval for the project. I think it might be noted that the story polls have been up since the first week of November, and that's a long time. It's been almost 3 months, and no negative comments have come forth from the public.
Okay, and is that all the comments that you wanted to make?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So then I will ask the commissioners one more time if you have any more questions for the applicant before I close the public hearing. And it looks like Vice Chair Barnett has a question for you.
I actually have two questions for Mr. Platt, if I may. It appears so, but is the proposed roof design and the window style the same as the current project?
Yes, the roof is the same design. The bay window has a slightly different roof on it. And then the windows are, yes, they're the same design as what's there now.
Okay, thank you. And I had one other question, and that is that the FAR slightly exceeds the allowable amount. And I was wondering if you considered changes in the plans as you progress through the planning process to reduce it to the actual FAR limits.
I'm sorry, if you could rephrase that.
Yes, did you look at possibly designing the property so that it would not exceed the FAR limits?
There's simply not enough room to get the size that we need. We believe all the spaces are of a modest size to the small size, and we kept it as small as we could, considering the needs and not exceeding the other neighbors and landing right in the middle of the pack of the largest neighbor, so to speak.
Okay, thank you for that response.
Okay, and then are there any other questions from commissioners for the applicant? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So then I will close the public hearing, and then I will move on to asking the commissioners if you have any further questions for staff, comments on the application, or would like to make a motion. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I do have just one question for staff, and it was just about a technicality in the packet. So under the background, it states that the architecture and site application is being referred to the Planning Commission because this applicant is proposing to exceed the maximum allowable FAR. It does not mention the setbacks. So I am just the exception. So I just wanted to clarify that if it wasn't exceeding the FAR, would it not have come to us?
Thank you for the question. If the project was not exceeding the FAR, it would have qualified for a minor residential development application, which would have been approved by the director after neighbor notification.
Okay, so then I do have a follow-up question, if that's okay, Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my follow-up then is, I just wanted to clarify that we should still make the finding about the setback.
Yes, since you are the deciding body, you need to make all the findings to approve the project, including the setbacks.
In total. Okay, I just wanted to clarify and make sure that everything made sense. Thank you very much.
Okay. Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the proposal. I do recall seeing this a long time ago when I was serving on HPC. And back then there was a proposal to create a turret and some other modifications to the architecture of this basic property, which at the time seemed pretty inappropriate. I see that the architect has taken time to really respect the current architecture and add on in a very appropriate Italianate Victorian manner. So I think the applicant has done a great job with doing that. I don't have an issue with the FAR and I don't have an issue with the setback. This is one of those neighborhoods where you've got a lot of older properties. The setbacks have routinely been, or probably were very, very small before the 5-foot requirement. So I don't have a problem with that. And I think that the size of how it exceeds the FAR seems reasonable in the floor plan, and I just don't have any issues with this project. I find it to be architecturally appropriate, and thank the Historic Preservation Committee for their work in making certain. I'd also like to comment that the story poles, I was really surprised the story poles seemed just a modest height over the existing property, given that it's going to be a 2-story structure. So I'm really pleased that it's only 6.5 feet higher than the existing. So that looked really really promising to me.
Thank you for all those great comments, Commissioner Janoff. Are there any other commissioners that have questions or comments? Commissioner Rasti.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I wanted to follow up and note that I was on the HPC when this application came through, and it came through our committee twice. And the homeowner and Mr. Plett were both very responsive in hearing our initial comments about sizing, massing, landscaping, and we thought they took a holistic approach to the project. As Commissioner Janoff notes, I think it works well stylistically, it works well in that neighborhood, and as part of the HPC, we were glad to approve it and move it forward in the process. So those are my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and that is always very helpful to hear from the Historic Preservation Committee. I would make a comment as well. In reviewing this and seeing the project in person, and I feel comfortable with this project. A couple of things I wanted to make note of: that number one, there was quite a substantial amount of neighborhood support for this. And then as far as the variances that are being asked for, they seem reasonable to me, especially since there are multiple other houses in the same neighborhood, in the immediate neighborhood, that have exceeded the FAR and also the setbacks. And so that was well demonstrated in the packet. So I don't see any issues at all with this project. It seems like it's well designed. Anyone else? Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. I agree. I think that it is definitely compatible with the neighborhood. So I do not I'm not concerned about the FAR. I also agree, seeing story poles in real life really made it seem like it wasn't going to be that large of a structure. So I'm okay with everything also, and I think that it meets the required findings that were outlined in the packet, especially for the exception of the setback, so reduced setback. So I'm happy with everything.
Okay, so then are there any other comments, or would someone like to make a motion? Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes, well, I support this application. We have heard from the community members about the issue that the Planning Commission is often allowing exceeding the FAR. And well, I think that it's modest in this case that we need to pay attention to those concerns that have been raised.
Okay, thank you for that comment. And I think that's a good thing to think about as we see other applications. Commissioner Thomas.
I agree. I also heard the public bring that up. Was that last night? Recently in some at some public hearings, and I think that that is definitely something that I wanted to discuss with all of the commissioners. Right now, I understand it's like not the space to do that, but I don't know where it is, just because you know, the exception to the FAR is really about neighborhood compatibility. And so as neighborhoods change, it seems really difficult to not continue to move in the direction of allowing over the FAR. So I agree. I just want to say that I don't know if that's something that we need to meet with town staff about, or I don't really know what the procedure is, but I would also appreciate just a little bit of support, because I have heard that many times from the community.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Commissioner Janoff.
I think this is as good a time as any to at least further that discussion because it has come up. I think a lot for me has to do with context. In the context of this particular neighborhood and the sort of the massing that you see of the homes in this immediate neighborhood, it makes sense. It doesn't seem to overpower. And in addition, we have great support from the neighbors. You know, when we look very critically at FAR, those projects that exceed FAR, we often hear from the neighbors saying, this is massive, it's too big, it's not appropriate. So, you know, weighing those two considerations makes a difference in the way I evaluate a project. So in this case, as I said, the neighborhood context as well as the neighborhood support goes a long way for me to accepting the FAR being over the limit.
Thank you, Commissioner Janoff. And before I go back to Commissioner Thomas, I would like to also weigh in on and say that while I think we should be, you know, cognizant of this anytime we see a request for the FAR, since we have such substantial neighborhood support, and as I mentioned during my previous comments, there are multiple other examples in this neighborhood that have exceeded the FAR, and some of which to a greater extent than this particular application. So when I look at trying to make findings for things like our residential design guidelines, those are the kinds of things that I look to see. And the side and rear setbacks are the same issue as well. There are multiple examples in the same neighborhood of people that are at the 3-foot setback. So for that reason, I can look at this particular application and say I would be comfortable with voting for making the findings. Then I'll go back to Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. I completely agree with everything that was just said by both the chair and commissioner. I think that the issue that we are having is that we have some neighborhoods in town that are changing and kind of developing or redeveloping. And those are the neighborhoods that it is a little bit more difficult, because we see that there is just redevelopment happening in those areas. So hopefully maybe with the new general plan and the housing element, we'll be able to identify some areas or have a little bit of guidance once those pass through, that which neighborhoods are kind of going to be targeted for supporting and redevelopment. But I think it's those like changing areas of town that are much harder for us to make decisions about, because the neighborhood's changing.
Very good. And thank you for your comments and for bringing that up. Commissioner Janoff, again.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add one other additional comment, and that is that the architecture of this project also drives a certain style. If you want to be true to an Italianate Victorian home, there's certain proportions that you want to keep. And so I think in addition to context and support, and because this is an historic neighborhood and it's a historic architectural style driven by the existing style, it's sort of the architecture also seems to demand that good proportions are kept intact. So I think from my perspective, that was another consideration.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Janoff. Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that Commissioner Janoff made a really good point. Like when you take context into consideration, in this case, it actually makes more sense to make it a little larger so that it fits with that style of architecture, which, as we know, is really important in the historic district. And I also think that the way they're doing it is really tasteful. And I was personally very surprised when I walked to see the back end of their house and saw that huge amount of space and knew that they were essentially just building up, besides adding that accessory structure. And then the other things, just for the setbacks, I was looking at the other ones in the neighborhood, and they're going to be one of few who have it above 0, 1, or 2. And so I think that with that in mind, it also makes it totally okay.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Is there anyone else that would like to comment on the application or make a motion? Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think the application is consistent with the goals and policies and actions in the community design element of the general plan, including the historic preservation provisions.
Very good. All right. So is there anyone that would like to make any further comments or make a motion? Commissioner Tabana.
I'll make a motion if I can right now. So I move to approve architecture and site application S-21-019 located at 202 University Avenue, APN 529-04-001. I can make the findings that the proposed project is categorically exempt pursuant to the adopted guidelines for the implementation of CEQA. I can make the finding that the project complies with the objective standards of Chapter 29 of the Town Code, with the exception of the request to exceed FAR standards for an accessory structure with reduced side and rear yard setbacks. I can make the findings as required by Section 29.40.075C of the Town Code for granting approval of an exception to the FAR standards. I can make the findings as required by Section 29.40.015B1 of the Town Code for granting approval of an accessory structure with reduced side and rear setbacks. I can also make the finding required by the town's residential design guidelines that the project complies with the residential design guidelines. I can make the considerations as required by Section 29.20.15 of the Town Code for granting approval of an architectural site application. And I can make the finding to approve architectural and site application S-21-019 with the conditions contained in Exhibit 3 and the development plans in Exhibit 10.
Very good. Thank you for that very thorough motion. Can I have a second for that? Let's see, Commissioner Janoff had her hand up first.
Thank you for that. Very well done motion. I second it.
Great. Okay, are there any further comments from the commission before I call the question? Let's see, I will start with Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy.
Yes.
Commissioner Tabana.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Chair Barnett.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so the motion passes unanimously. And Director Paulson, are there appeal rights for this action by the commission?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision to the Town Council. Forms are available online and in the clerk's office. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Director Paulson. And so then we will move on to other business. However, we have no items on the agenda for other business this week. So we will move on to the report from the Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple items. I know some of you were able to attend the strategic priorities session with the town council last night. So hopefully you found that beneficial and informative. I also want to let folks know that on February 1st, the town council will be considering an extension of the urgency ordinance for Senate Bill 9. So that is going to be up for their consideration next week. And they have the opportunity to extend it, potentially extend it with modifications, or decide not to extend it, in which case staff would just utilize the requirements in SB 9 and not have any of the other local controls and or objective standards that we have put in place for the urgency ordinance.
Okay, and thank you for that, Director Paulson. And then now we move on to subcommittee reports. In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, each planning commissioner serves in the additional capacity of a committee member on another town committee, which in our case includes the General Plan Committee. And for this year, it will be primarily the Housing Element Advisory Board. And then secondly, the Historic Preservation Committee. And third, but not least, the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee. Do we have any subcommittee reports for this evening since our last Planning Commission meeting on the 12th? I know the General Plan Committee, no. So we've had no meetings since then. Okay, and then I will just check in and see if we have commission matters. Is there anything that anyone on the commission would like to bring up at this time? Don't see any hands raised. And so then, seeing none, I would like to thank all. Oh, I'm sorry. It was Commissioner.
It would be helpful to the Planning Commission if Mr. Paulson indicated the tentative date for our review of the general plan and the EIR.
So the tentative date, based on a tentative timeline with our consultants preparing the response to comments, it would be at the earliest, the first meeting in March. So that would be March 9th.
And since we are in commission matters, I did want to ask a question since I did view the meeting last night. Does the potential agenda item from a couple of council members to do a fiscal analysis, is that possibly going to delay the March 9th date? Or do we not know yet?
We don't know yet. So the town manager will work with the mayor to see when that can be agendized for discussion by council. And as that information becomes available, I will let the Planning Commission know at our next meeting. I imagine by our next meeting, we should have some guidance as to when that's going and what direction it's possibly taking.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Thomas.
Director Paulson, how far in advance do you think we'll get the draft that we are supposed to be analyzing at that March 9th date, if everything goes as planned?
So I believe we've sent links to everyone of the draft.
Okay.
I will double admin staff.
Yeah, is there going to be an updated one though from the consultants, or no? We can assume what we have access to now is what we're going to be looking at.
So you will definitely want to be familiar with what you have access to now. Mm-hmm. What is being prepared is the response to comments, which will be part of what's called the final EIR. Yeah. So those response to comments, in addition to the draft EIR, those are combined to become the final EIR.
Okay, thank you.
And on that note, I would say, I'll get to you in a minute, Commissioner Raspy, but I would encourage everyone that hasn't already, well, hopefully everyone has at least looked at it. Please do start reading the general plan now if you haven't already, as well as the EIR, because in addition to that, we'll have all of the comments that have come in, as well as we need to consider like the town council's study session and so on and so forth. There's going to be multiple other venues and information that we need to consider in addition to those two documents when we get to that review. And so since we do have at least a month, this would be a good time to make sure that we catch up on our readings. Okay, and then Commissioner Raspy, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point. I think because Commissioner Clark and I are recent adds to the Planning Commission, we have not yet seen the draft EIR or links to the draft EIR. So if those could be forwarded to us, that would be great.
Oh, okay. Well, they're really important. So staff, I'm sure will take care of that for us. All right.
Thanks so much.
And then one other thing, just to confirm, I did hear from Director Paulson yesterday that we will be having a meeting on February 9th, at least that's the intent right now. Is that correct? Okay, so then our next meeting will be on February 9th. And if there's no other questions or comments, I will say that this meeting is adjourned, and I thank you all for your participation and excellent comments tonight.